So it's widely known in the PC space that buying a pre-built desktop is typically more expensive on average than building one yourself. That's because the system integrator, or SI, who sells the pre-built has to make a profit, which the vast majority of them accomplish in two major ways: buying parts in bulk, and using really cheap parts where possible to increase their profit margins. Pre-builts typically use a reliable CPU and graphics card because the only 3 companies in the world who make them are massive, reputable brands. But for just about every other PC part out there, there's a multitude of different vendors, some of which manufacture their parts with higher standards than others. So you could stumble across a pre-built online that has a decent looking CPU and graphics card at its core, but the other components in the build could be and often are below average quality. That's the focus of today's video. Where exactly are SIs cutting corners, and how do their penny pinching practices affect the end user? This video is brought to you by the ASRock X299 Creator. Supporting Intel Core X series processors, the X299 Creator offers a robust 13-phase power design, quad-channel memory support, and loads of connectivity for your every need. Best-in-class components and build quality ensure maximum longevity and reliability no matter your line of work. Click on the link below to learn more. For comparison, I put together my own parts list for a budget 1440p gaming PC that came out to $720. So let's see how that compares to a pre-built desktop of the same price in terms of performance, features, and quality. Diving right in, my awesome and totally perfect list is to the left, and you'll see the lowly pre-built scum on the right. No, I'm kidding. Partially. So my CPU of choice for this roughly $700 build is a Ryzen 5 1600AF. And if you guys have seen any of my recent videos, this comes as no surprise. I keep recommending this processor because it's essentially a Ryzen 5 2600 12 nanometer processor, not 14 nanometer like the original Ryzen 5 1600, but it's $85. 6 cores, 12 threads, overclocking freedom, all that good stuff comes included with the Wraithspire cooler. This chip is the bee's knees, and it just packs in a tremendous amount of value. I can't recommend it enough. Versus the CPU on our Skytech Shadow gaming computer PC desktop that comes in at $730, so pretty much the same price as ours, is a Ryzen 5 1600. This is also 6 cores and 12 threads, but it does not appear to be the AF model. It's not listed anywhere here. It just says Ryzen 5 1600 no matter where you look, so I'm assuming that's what it is. It's first gen Ryzen 14 nanometer, which is gonna be maybe 10 to 15% slower in terms of gaming performance compared to the Ryzen 5 2600, which again is what the Ryzen 5 1600 AF is. So right out of the gate, we're already seeing less performance with the pre-built than we are our own system. Now the motherboard I went with for our DIY build is the Gigabyte B450M DS3H Micro ATX AM4 motherboard. It's $73. This is a basic B. A basic board. A basic board is what that means. But there are some likable qualities about this board for the price. For instance, we do have an M.2 slot. Not a lot of boards of this price range actually feature that on AM4. Some of them do, but not all of them. We also get 4 DIMM slots as opposed to 2, so we can always expand our memory down the line if we want to. And we have an 8-pin EPS power connector for our CPU. A lot of similar boards will only have a 4-pin connector, which is perfectly fine for a Ryzen 5 1600 AF. But if we were to upgrade our CPU down the line to a chip with higher TDP or more cores or anything like that, then we would be limiting the amount of power we're able to send that thirstier CPU. With this configuration, we have a bit more headroom to work with, as opposed to our Skytech Shadow system, which it doesn't really say what motherboard this is, but whatever's in here is definitely on the budget side of things, because if you look at the rear I/O, I mean, it looks just as basic as ours. I think ours is a little bit better, actually. There's also no video outs here, whereas you get dual link DVI and HDMI on this board. It's not a huge deal because we're using a discrete graphics card for both systems. It could come in handy if you ever wanted to repurpose the board for like a home theater PC, and sometimes the video outs on the board are just nice to have for basic troubleshooting, assuming that you have a processor with integrated graphics. Additionally, even though we don't know the exact model number of the motherboard, we do know from the description that it's on the A320 chipset, which is bottom of the barrel. It's bottom of the barrel for AM4. The main bummer here is that there's typically no overclocking support on A320, so you won't be able to squeeze any more performance out of your CPU. You're pretty much capped at its out-of-the-box performance. The fact that it's an A320 board also tells us there's a higher chance of it having only 2 DIMM slots, a 4-pin power connector for your CPU, and potentially no M.2 slot. These are all really great features to have, and ones that I would shoot for even if you're on a super tight budget. And they're obviously features that we really can't confirm or deny if this pre-built motherboard even has them. That's actually another really important thing to note about pre-builds. You don't always 100% know what you're getting until it's too late. For memory, I went with the tried and true G.Skill Ripjaws 5. This is a 16GB dual channel kit, so we get 2 DIMM sticks, 8 gigs each at DDR4 3600 speed. That's great. Ryzen processors are very happy with that higher frequency. What do we get with our Skytech Shadow? 8 8 gigabytes. Holy moly, there's only 8 gigabytes here, so half the capacity. Does it say speeds? DDR4 3000. So not only are you getting half the capacity for the same price, but we're yet again giving up some precious in-game performance because of the slower memory speeds. But 8 gigs, I mean, there are gonna be some games that eat most of that up with very little left over for other applications, whether it be Discord or web browsers. I mean, that's one of the great things about PC gaming is being able to multitask, but you can't do that if you're running low on system memory, which this system is already at a severe disadvantage for that. So not good. Not good. So my storage setup consists of 2 drives. We have a Seagate Barracuda 2TB 7200 RPM drive for $55 and a WD Green 240 gig SATA 3 SSD. It's not a super fancy setup, but it's gonna get the job done. We can install our operating system and other frequently used applications on our SSD with plenty of headroom left over, and the 2TB drive can be for all of our games, you know, mass media and things like that. Whereas on our Sky Shadow pre-built, we have a 500 gig SSD, and that's it. So they actually have us beat here in terms of how much solid state storage they have. They've doubled our capacity there, but we've more than quadrupled their overall capacity, which means we have a lot more space for games and other things. Like you're gonna buy this pre-built, and then a month later, if that, you're gonna have to buy another drive and swap it in. So then that factors into the cost. Now you're talking maybe an $800 build or whatever, depending on what you get, whereas this is gonna last us a really long time over here. And circling back to what I said earlier, we also have no real way to tell what kind of SSD this is. Apart from it, you know, most likely being SATA Rev 3, there's no way they're sticking NVMe or anything like that in here. It doesn't say anything about a model name. There's no pictures of it. So we don't know. We don't know if it's like just some super dirt cheap, obscure Chinese knockoff brand you've never heard of. That could very well be fine. We have to consider that too. It might be a perfectly fine quality drive, but it might also not be. So this is one of those things where you just don't know what you're buying, what you're spending your money on. Whereas here, you know exactly what you're getting. You can read reviews on the exact parts on every component that you're choosing, as opposed to leaving all of that decision making up to an SI. Now this is where things get really interesting and take a turn for the worst if you're the pre-built desktop in this example. My GPU for our build was the EVGA RTX 2060. SC Gaming. It's got a single fan, so you know, obviously you'd prefer 2, but it's $299. This was one of the cheapest, if not the cheapest, RTX 2060 on the market right now. It's not a super, but this card is still more than capable to handle, you know, 60 plus FPS, 1440p gaming. I would even go so far as to say it averages anywhere between 60 and 80 FPS, which is a really nice sweet spot for a entry-level 1440p machine. On the flip side, we have a GTX 1660. Not Super, not TI, just a 1660. So now we're operating in completely different leagues here. Perfectly adequate and super smooth 1440p gaming over here, and decent 1080p gaming in this corner. This is not gonna be able to handle 1440p at all, unless it's like, you know, some indie game or esports and things like that, of course. If I'm taking an educated guess based on what I can remember from my testing, the RTX 2060 is roughly 20 to 30% faster on average than the GTX 1660. And I think that's being pretty conservative. What this means is that right out of the box on day one, your DIY PC will be significantly faster than a pre-built for the same price, and you won't feel the need to replace it so soon. I feel like the GTX 1660 in a year, you're gonna want an upgrade. You're gonna want to push more pixels, you're gonna want a higher refresh rate. This is very, very much an entry-level card versus something that's very capable in mid-range. For my case, I went with a Thermaltake Versa H18. This is a micro ATX tower, which matches the form factor of our motherboard, and I really like this case. It's $50. If you're on a budget, then one of the few things that should really matter about a case that you're choosing is airflow. And this one has pretty decent airflow from the looks of it. I mean, the entire front panel is completely mesh, and then the interior layout doesn't look bad for a budget case of this caliber. Like $50, like you're getting tempered glass side panel, power supply shroud, cutouts in all the right places. It looks like there's a bit of room even behind the motherboard tray. One downer here is that you only get one included fan. So that's maybe something you have to factor in down the line, maybe throw in like a $5 or $10 fan at the front just to give a stronger path of airflow. But you know, you're not stuffing a 2080 Ti in here. It's an RTX 2060, which is a very power efficient card along with a 65 watt TDP chip. They're not gonna get super hot. And with a well ventilated case like this, sometimes a single 120 millimeter fan is sufficient when you're just starting out. Now over here we have this thing, Thermaltake Versa N21. Oh, it's the Thermaltake case, that's funny. N21, let me look that up. Not available, so we have no idea what this case costs. Let me check Amazon really quick. 103, okay, this is obviously not right. That can't be right. Since we can't be sure what the actual MSRP is, let's take a closer look at this guy. At first I thought this blue area was mesh, and I was like, okay, that's good airflow and stuff, but upon closer inspection, it's not. It's a translucent panel designed for gamer. The glossy front top panels deliver stylish images. No! I hate how they're passing this off as a feature. Yo, dog, we heard you like thermal throttling, so we closed off your front panel so your fans choke and your components overheat. You're welcome. What? Don't tell me this is the only ventilation area at the front panel. That's ridiculous. What is this part of the ventilation, or is this just more terrible design? I mean, I don't want to comment too much on aesthetics and stuff because it's all subjective, but damn, that's ugly. Look at that side panel window. This is case from 2003. At the very least, I will say this. It does have one leg up on the H18 in terms of fans. It's got two, it looks like it's got maybe two 120s at the front and then one more at the rear, definitely. So, you know, maybe that offsets the terrible, what looks to be terribly closed off and choked off airflow at the front. But who knows, without proper testing. Gamers Nexus, bad signaling, Gamers Nexus! Hot diggity friggin' damn. Let's take a shot of the inside here. This is just the Amazon product page of the case itself, but you can see it's a pretty standard, kind of typical layout. You can definitely tell it's an older case, because not only does it have a dated aesthetic on the outside, but it's got a couple 5¼ inch bays, which are not quite as common anymore with modern cases. It's got those typical 2.5 inch, 3.5 inch drive trays at the bottom. I mean, it looks like a fairly decent interior, actually. It doesn't look bad. It's just the airflow situation that's really not selling it for me. And again, we're not dropping super hot running components in here, but we might someday, we might want to upgrade our GPU to something that's blazing fast, like a 2080 or 2080 Ti, that is going to need adequate airflow coming from the chassis primarily. And I have my doubts, my reservations that this case is going to be able to deliver that. Again, it just seems that we're getting more performance and longevity with the parts that we choose ourselves. Last but not least, for our power supply, I chose a Seasonic S12 III. This is a 500-watt unit, 80+ bronze certified. Seasonic makes great power supplies. If you look up trusted reviews on them, you'll find the vast majority of them have very high marks and are super reliable. Whereas over here we have, it doesn't say exactly once again, but powered by an 80+ certified 500-watt power supply. So it is 500 watts, same wattage, but probably less efficiency because this doesn't say 80+ bronze. It just says 80+, which is a few percentage points of efficiency below 80+ bronze. And we also have no idea who manufactures this power supply or if it's gonna explode in our system 6 months down the line. The last thing I'll note here is that to the pre-built's credit, most of them do ship with a copy of Windows. So we have Windows 10 Home 64-bit here, whereas we don't have an operating system here. However, you can create a bootable USB drive, install Windows on your desktop, and pretty much use it to 99% of its functionality for free. Yes, you'll have a little watermark in the corner of your screen, and no, you won't be able to do stupid things like hide your taskbar, but for the most part, if you're trying to save money, you can go a really long time, if not forever, without activating Windows. So just to recap here, we have two systems that are identical in price, but one is probably, I would say, even 25 to 35% faster. When you consider the CPU and GPU that we have compared to this one, the pairing is just on another level. So you're gonna be able to take advantage of higher refresh rates, higher frame rates, more smoothness in game, higher resolution, better graphical settings, all that jazz with this setup. So you're really gaining a lot without having to spend a dime more than what you would on this pre-built. We've got 16 gigs of RAM that's gonna last us a long time, plenty of storage, and the case is gonna be able to accommodate liquid AIOs in the future, longer graphics cards, hotter running components that require better airflow. Whereas over here, some of the corners this SI has cut are so drastic that I would feel like I'd already have to upgrade it on day one. Now, I know a lot of you guys are probably thinking it would have been really cool to see the inside of the system so we could make better comparisons. So I've actually pulled up another pre-built system that's a little bit more expensive. It's about 20% more expensive at $870, but I'm bringing this up because you can actually see the inside, so it should give us a slightly better idea of what we could have expected to find inside of that $730 pre-built. This is a different SI, this is ABS, and we're looking at their Mage E gaming desktop. So right off the bat, we've got an Intel Core i5-9400F. So we've gone Intel here. Core i5-9400F is actually not a bad CPU. If you're just talking about gaming, like, it does have better single-threaded performance than the Ryzen 5 1600AF or the Ryzen 5 2600. So it beats us there. Then again, this is 20% more expensive than our DIY system, the GeForce RTX 2060, so we're even there. Let's see if we can tell which model this is. Is that Zotac? That looks to be a Zotac card, so good brand. Zotac makes great products, so that's good. We also have 16 gigs of memory now, yay, yay, but does it say what the speed is? It doesn't say. 16 gigs DDR4, no mention of speed. Enhanced, that's as much as it goes. Okay, so it looks like, I really can't tell. But based on the way the RAM looks, 0 heat spreaders, so this is definitely like value-oriented budget RAM. I'm gonna guess 3000. I'm gonna guess it's roughly the same speed as the last pre-built, so 3000 megahertz, which means that with our DIY system, we're actually offsetting a bit of the FPS we're losing from our CPU with faster memory speeds. Still sticking with a 500-ish gigabyte SSD and no mechanical drives, just the 500 gigs. So prepare to spend another $50 on more storage here. Unfortunately, there's still no picture or model name of the the SSD, we just know the capacity and that's it. It's most likely gonna be SATA Rev 3, 6 gigabit per second, 2.5-inch drive that I would imagine is installed probably underneath the power supply shroud right about here. What kind of motherboard do we have here? Does not say. It's definitely not gonna be like Z390 or something. So here we can see that it's an ASRock board, but it's definitely on the low end of things. Once again, they've cut corners with the motherboard. If I had to take a wild guess, I would say this is like an H310 motherboard, which means it's got, it definitely doesn't have any overclocking support, fewer HSIO lanes, no Intel Optane memory support, things like that. And, oh, I think there's only 2 DIMM slots on this board. 2 DIMM slots. Do we at least have an 8-pin? So we get an 8-pin power connector for CPU, but only 2 DIMM slots. So you're pretty much capped here. Unless you swap out the kit entirely, you're capped at 16 gigs. You can't just drop in an identical kit and upgrade to 32 gigs down the line. So that's a bummer. And look at this Intel stock cooler. Now that the AMD Wraiths have been out, like, these just look so sad. I'm actually really surprised Intel hasn't refreshed their stock coolers, because they are ugly, first of all, but more importantly, they're noisy. They're really noisy under load, and they're just not great performers. Certainly not offering the same level of value that the AMD Wraith coolers are. This case actually looks a lot better than the previous pre-built, because I think we've got a full mesh front panel here. Plus we have 3 fans at the front and 1 at the back. So this is, out of the box, this is gonna have better airflow most likely than the chassis I picked out for our DIY system. And it's a pretty attractive case, you know, it's very clean, minimalistic. I really don't mind it. You know, the RGB is not super obnoxious, I guess depending on who you ask. And the internal layout looks fairly similar. Looks like you could even mount some SSDs over here. So not too terrible actually. Unfortunately, I can't say the same thing about the power supply. What is that? Now I'm not gonna knock it. Don't knock it till you try it, but it looks like it's a 500 watt unit, AX500 XT. Maybe I could look it up. Oh God, it's a Raid Max. It's a Raid Max power supply. Oh no. Okay, so it's a Raid Max unit. This is a $33 power supply. Is it even 80 plus? It is not. There's no mention of it, which is not great. Even the $700 pre-built had an 80 plus unit. Pre-builts are just so unpredictable. What else is under this PSU shroud? Hopefully a fire extinguisher. Last thing I have to point out here, just because, ketchup and mustard cables. Not the prettiest, you know? Look at this, ew. Oh! So in the end, I would say this system is probably a little bit faster than ours, just because it does have the faster gaming CPU. We closed the gap a little bit with our faster memory, but probably not quite enough to make it even. So I would say this is probably on average 8 to 12, maybe 15% faster. But then again, we're spending 20% more, and you're stuck with much lower quality components, like a very inefficient power supply and a super low end motherboard. And I think that brings up an important takeaway here too, is that even if you scaled up and got like a nice pre-built and like spent good money on a pre-built, like let's take a look at this guy right here. This one's $1,100, roughly $1,100. It's got the RGB front panel, it's got all the tempered glaze. It's a nice pre-built, right? $1,000 is a lot to spend on a gaming PC, but you still have to deal with the system integrator's corner cutting, which means that even if the CPU and the GPU are bumping, you're gonna have things like, look at the stock cooler. Why didn't they just use a Wraith cooler that comes included with the Ryzen 5 3600? They used this old ancient piece of garbage that is so noisy, it's unbearable. Last time I used one of these, I ripped my ears off and then had to sew them back on. Don't ask me how. One stick of memory, like again with the cheap motherboard and God knows what power supply, but you guys get the idea. Even if you're buying a nice pre-built, and this is just for like the majority of SIs and pre-builts, there are some pre-builts out there that are actually good. Some of the ones that we've talked about on this channel and featured, NZXT makes awesome pre-builts because they actually use components that, like similar components to the ones we're using here. They don't go out and cheap out on garbage power supplies and motherboards that are gonna cost you later. So there are exceptions to the rule, but in general, no matter what price tier that you go for, even if you get a nice pre-built like this one, or quote unquote nice, you know, expensive, whatever, you're still gonna be stuck with all of the crappy decisions that some of these SIs have made for you. And if you're a fan of the channel, you already know how I feel about this, which is build your own PC, if you can. You know, I understand that there are some scenarios or certain lifestyles or whatever, disabilities, whatever, that prevent people from being able to build a system, but if you can, then compared to buying a pre-built, a DIY PC is gonna give you more performance per dollar, it's gonna give you better quality components that last a longer time, it's gonna give you a better upgrade path, and more bells and whistles that haven't been stripped down completely by a system integrator. So many reasons to go that route. I hope you guys found this video useful. If you did, toss a like. Smash that like button for the algorithm, it helps a lot, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. A lot of people who watch these videos, I've been looking at the metrics more closely lately, like half of you are not even subscribed. So what the hell are you doing? Subscribe. If you made it to this point in the video, subscribe, because I do stuff like this all the time. Check out Bitwit.tech, our merchandise store, of course. Thank you guys so much for all the support there. Regardless of what you buy, all the money goes straight back into the channel so we can continue developing awesome content like this. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay safe out there. It's an absolute madhouse right now, so everyone keep calm and game on. That's a stupid thing to say at the end of a video or anytime, but thank you guys so much again. Have a good one. I'm gonna get out of here. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.